Hi everyone, Mariana with 3Pace Classroom. In today's video, I want to share with you some tips on how you can have a conversation with your students about what's happening in Ukraine right now, the war in Ukraine. I'm also going to give you a book recommendation that you can use to teach about this topic and a free download that you can have to print in your classroom to use to talk about the war in Ukraine. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart. I am Ukrainian. This is my Ukrainian blouse. My ancestry is Ukrainian. My heritage is Ukrainian. I am a first generation Canadian, Ukrainian Canadian, born in Canada, but my family ancestry comes from Ukraine. So this topic is very important to me, and it's very important for me to share these tips on how we can address the conflict that's happening in Ukraine. Now, at the time of recording this video, it's been about 10 days since the Russian army has invaded Ukraine, and so I'm sure there has been some conversations in your classroom already, but in case you're feeling uneasy or in case you are still unsure of how you can have these conversations with your kids, I'm going to share with you some tips that you can use in your classroom to talk to your students about this war that's happening in Ukraine. So the first thing you're going to want to do is now, even 10 days after the war has started, you're going to want to check in with your students and see what they already know about the war. This can be factual information or this could be rumors that they have heard. You can do this in a journal prompt style, so you ask them to write it down in a journal, or you could have them answer to you orally via Flipgrid. But either way, you're going to want to check and see what have they heard, what kind of information have they heard, so that you can address specifically all of the misinformation that they have heard, and you can address that in the conversation that you will have. So once you've had time to read over all of your students' answers, then you are going to create a circle in your classroom. That could be on your carpet or that could be with your desks, but you're going to reiterate that this is a safe space, a safe circle for students to express their emotions, express their frustrations, to sit with their thoughts. It's a safe place that you can share and have dialogue. It's important to emphasize that while you are in that safe circle, that we are going to respect everybody's emotions, and those emotions could be different from one child to the next, right? They could be emotions of relief, they could be exhaustion, they could be depression, they could be sadness and anger, frustration, confusion. Tons of different emotions will come out of this safe circle, and it's just important that the kids understand that this is a safe space that they can express that emotion, including the teacher. There have been many times where I have been in front of my class and I have started crying. More often than not, it happens on Remembrance Day. The emotions really overwhelm me, and I begin to cry in front of my students. But when my dad had a cancer diagnosis, I was vulnerable in front of my students as well. And in this safe circle, it's important for them to understand that it is safe for everybody to express and release these emotions. So in the safe circle, you are going to want to be very clear and explain to the students exactly what is happening in Ukraine. You don't want to fluff it up. You want to be very clear. The Russian army and the Russian government have decided to invade Ukraine. Be careful. You do not want to generalize. You don't want to say Russia has invaded Ukraine, because in fact, there are many Russian citizens that do not agree with the war, and they are out there protesting right now that they don't want the war. So just be very careful that you use the words the Russian government or the Russian army, but also there are soldiers that are surrendering because they also do not want this war. So just be very careful in the words that you use, but be very clear. The Russian government has decided to invade the peaceful country, Ukraine. You can also mention that with any war, there will be many people that will get hurt, both physically, emotionally, and there will be people that will be killed. Now, while you're explaining the situation in Ukraine, the topic of refugees will come up, and I found this amazing book that you can pick up. It's called What is a Refugee? And it is a fantastic book that you can use from students all the way down to kindergarten to grade 6. You can use it, and it just goes into very basic wording about what a refugee is. And it talks about, there's a page here that talks about refugees had to flee their country because their country was in danger in war. And so if you need a great resource to teach about refugees from wars, I picked this up originally because I was going to talk to my students about the refugees that were fleeing Afghanistan when the Taliban army came in. And I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would be picking up and using this book as well for my kids, talking about the conflict in Ukraine. Now, while you are describing the war in Ukraine, make sure that you reiterate that everybody here is safe, everybody in the school is safe, and that we live in a safe country, Canada. It's important to recognize that, and it's important to reassure our students that everybody here is safe. It's also really important to reassure our students that it's okay to feel scared or confused or angry. Again, we are in a safe circle, and those emotions, while you are describing the situation, it's okay to feel those things. Once you've talked to your students about what's happening in Ukraine, pause. Let the information sink in. Give them time to process, especially our students that are English language learners. Give them a chance to process all of that information. We don't know to what extent students really understand what's happening. We also don't know what kind of schema they have or what kind of background experiences they have. You might even have some refugees in your classroom. You might have some students that have left a country because it was unpeaceful. So just let that information sink in and let them absorb it and understand it in their own personal way. Then you can open the circle for discussion. You can have students comment. You can have students ask questions. I like to use a talking stick, so if somebody has something to say, you just pass the talking stick to them, and it just kind of keeps balance in order so that emotions don't flare up. But if you have something to say, you will hold the talking stick and you can comment. You can say something like, I feel really sad about what's happening in Ukraine, or your students might have a question and say, but I still don't understand why, Vladimir Putin thinks it's a good idea to invade Ukraine. So you can have this open circle for discussion. And as the teacher, you don't need to respond. You don't feel like you need to answer every question. Don't feel like you need to respond to every comment. You can just let that information sit as well. But you can judge your students, and if you feel like they need a response or if you feel like a response is justified, then absolutely share it. But it can always just be as simple as a sharing circle. And of course, you are already an amazing educator and you already know to be honest with your students. And if there is a question that they are not sure of, just be open and say, I don't know the answer to that. Maybe we could look the information up together. Maybe we could find a credible source and answer our questions. Just be open and honest with your students at all times. Finally, when the conversation is dwindling down, you're going to want to reassure students and let them know that in times like these, it's normal to feel helpless, especially when the conflict and the war is happening across the world. What can you do here in Canada? What can you do to help yourself and to help the people in Ukraine? And there's always something you can do. I mean, very simply, your class can collect money donations to be donated to the charity. You can collect physical items for donation that can be shipped off for the war efforts. But also it can come down to as simple as being kind to the person that is sitting next to you. If everybody in the world was kind to the person next to them, there would not be a war. So do good things where you are, be kind to the people that are around you, and be kind to others. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention is this free printable that you can get from my TPT shop. I will link my shop down below. This is a free handout. It talks about understanding the war in Ukraine. The first page just gives a bit of an overview about the country of Ukraine, but then the middle pages talks about why, what are the ideas behind the war in Ukraine, how can you help? There's a section on the bottom. On the back, a couple things for you students to remember. Again, it talks about how, not to generalize the country of Russia. Many people in Russia do not want this war, so just a little bit to remember. And then also you can have your students fill out here on the bottom what are questions that they might still have after talking about the war in Ukraine. So again, this is a free download that you can pick up in my TPT shop. The link is down below. Now, if you're watching this video, it's because you are an educator and you are seeking to feel more confident in having these conversations with your students. So I can already know that you are a fantastic educator. But I do hope that you did find some sort of clarity or some sort of confidence in this video to help you have those conversations in your classroom. If you found this information to be helpful, then feel free to give this video a like so that it can show up in other people's YouTube algorithms, and then they can find the video as well. I would love to know if you have any comments or questions. You can leave them down below. I love responding to you guys. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I hope that the conversations that you have from here on in are helpful and healing. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next video.